Hello class, my name is Joanna and today I would like to discuss the artist and activist Doris Salcedo. To begin, I'd like to go over the brief history of human rights in Colombia. So, gender-based violence is a continuous act that harms women in Colombia. A report was done with the United Nations that helps to explain this issue by explaining that while there have been fewer issues with armed conflict, an uptrend in fewer gender equality and women's rights improvements is a necessity that's still happening. Sexual violence sees an uptrend specifically among minority women and those who have been activists. In our own educational setting, this can be seen in many documentaries that we viewed. One that might come to mind is In the Time of the Butterflies. This would be just a production that allows us to view human rights and the issues with human rights that are being stated in Colombia. Cultural productions, such as art, film, and music, help to share the pain and loss that cultures have endured. These productions are made in an essence to help others feel and notice the shift that has occurred when it otherwise might go unnoticed. While there are many artists that you can deep dive into that would provide insight to these areas, one in particular caught my eye in the one-on-one meeting I had with Professor Lopez. This artist is Doris Salcedo. I didn't know much about Doris prior to this project. However, the art that was produced both captured my eyes and my mind and opened me up to a more emotional and educational connection than prior art pieces may have. Before we continue with the presentation, it is important to note who Doris Salcedo is, including her background and why she creates the art that she does. Doris Salcedo was born in 1958 in Colombia and attended school in Colombia along with in the United States. Salcedo obviously uses the workings of everyday objects to display the silenced lives of victims in third world areas and works to represent the gaps between a higher power and lower power, trauma, oppression, migration issues, and suffering. Salcedo has received many awards for her work and shares that her work is with the victims of senseless and brutal acts. I haven't listed the awards in this particular slide. However, the awards will be listed on a later slide so that you can easily look at the dates and see all the findings. I thought that it would be too much to include on one slide with all this other information. Doris Salcedo's pieces that we'll be looking at today include the one on the top, which is called Sumando Ascensius. It was done in 2016. The one in the bottom left, which is called Shibboleth, which was done in 2007. And the one in the bottom right, which is called Unland, Irreversible Witness. There's actually 3 installments of this one, so the one that we're looking at is 1995, but I thought it was important to include 1995 to 1998 so you can get a better understanding of how many installments there was of this particular piece. So, Sumando Ascensius. Sumando Ascensius, like I said before, was created in 2016 and took place in Bolivar Square. In this piece, you can see the art formation involved pieces of cloth that are woven together, but exactly what was this intention? Well, you see, 4 years prior to the making of Sumando Ascensius, there were conversations about ending the 50 years of armed conflict between the government and the revolutionary armed forces in Colombia. However, the peace treaty was ultimately denied, and the people feared that violence would soon take place and threaten their everyday lives. Salcedo decided to do this particular work of art in a way that showed the importance of peace and the other side of importance, this being violence and lives that had been lost due to unnecessary violence. This particular piece also contains names of those who are lost due to the violence and help to express the necessity for peace to continue. Salcedo herself explained the piece as a work of art in which victims of the armed conflict are put in the center of Colombia's political life by an informal community formed during the making of the project. These were generous weavers who were able to gather in one single image the pain of thousands of families. The work is an act of mourning. Shibboleth was created again in 2007 in the floor of Turbine Hall in tape modern London. The work quite literally cracked the floor open, exposing the underneath of the floor's surface. The crack was at least 548 feet long and served several purposes. Salcedo chose to place this long divisional crack on the floor as a way of showing the scars, trauma, and divide that happens when migrating to a different place. This crack specifically symbolizes the immigrant experience in Europe. It was stated within my research that individuals who utilize this track often have to contort their bodies to be able to avoid the crack. Obviously, the large crack was eventually patched up and is now free of any cracks and damages. However, the importance of this piece is much more than just a crack. Unland Irreversible Witness. So like I said before, there are 3 installments of this piece. The one we're looking at was done in 1995, and this piece, when you look at it, is kind of eerie in the sense it's an old bed, it's placed in a room by itself, it's got a doll bed nailed to it. However, this representation is actually emptiness, but the bed is very real identities of children left behind. This piece is further explained to be utilized as a production of children witnessing the death of their parents at the hands of the government. Salcedo explains that the children in Colombia want to be heard and expressed in a way that matters and in a way that shows the pain in which they endure from the trauma they face on a daily basis. Specifically, Salcedo states, "I was trying to place myself in their situation. The children wanted their story to be known. In Colombia, you are aware that you are invisible, especially in the countryside. They simply wanted to exist." I previously mentioned that the other installments were done in 1997 and 1998. I have listed those pictures side by side so that you can see the other ones. The 1997 installment is called Unland, the Orphan's Tunic. It represents the children who now have lost their sense of family at the hands of violence. And the 1998 installment is called Unland, Audible in the Mouth, which represents the screams that children produce. Unland is a word that's made up by Doris Salcedo, and that represents the displacement of children. So how does Salcedo's work relate to human rights? I previously mentioned that she focuses on the silenced victims and their struggles and uses everyday lives to make an excessive statement. We have just gone through several of those items, from pieces of fabric woven together to fight peace, to a crack in a pavement that symbolizes the trauma and heartache that families face when trying to relocate to an area, to a child bed that has a doll bed nailed to it, in the piece symbolizing tragic loss that children face when they see their parents die. The key focus within Doris Salcedo's work doesn't just aim at the equality aspect, but also the aspect that we as humans have fundamental rights that are much more than we perceive them as. Her installments are made to allow the audience to question what they think they know and challenge what is wrong and right. Her installments also are made as a way for you to explain the burdens that you have. You have this pain, you know this pain, so let's express this pain. Doris Salcedo mentions this more in the following video.
Normally, art is the essence of our work. I think if we don't know our past, there is no way we can live the present properly, and there is no way we can face the future. So when all these catastrophic events take place, we tend to remember just the last one. So when past really piles up behind our backs, and we don't really look at it, we don't confront it. It is very important to bring these past events, to bring them alive. And at the same time, I don't think art can solve problems. I'm not doing anything for these families. I'm not doing anything for these victims. And that's a reality we have to face when we talk about this type of art that is trying to address political issues. Art does not have the ability to reveal. And if I did anything right, then some aspects of the lives that were lost may be present. But maybe the viewer can connect to those aspects. I think we all have memories of pain, and those memories maybe can connect with the memories of pain inscribed in these pieces. Actually, I think it's difficult to deal with horror events and tragic events and then pour all that pain into beauty. That's something that I find perverse. But there is On one hand, I'm saying that. On the other hand, I believe that if you want to dignify a human life, then you have to come back to beauty. Because that's how we find dignity. And I almost turn into a sacred space. That's the level of beauty that should be present in the work.
So from the video presentation, you can see that it's important to remember that Doris is speaking from not only past situations in history, but also the trauma of this history. And the key takeaway from the video is the explanation that art is meaningful in the way that it touches you and those around you, and that it also is a way of gathering your own pain and trauma and releasing it. This is explained by the photo that was shown where there was a bunch of chairs stacked on each other. This was the pressure held on backs because of migration and force. Doris explained that her art alone cannot carry the message of these burdens, and that while it's helpful, it's not the ability to change anything. One person can't change it, the world. It has to be a group effort. So why did I choose Doris Salcedo? Well, I previously mentioned that her work really stuck with me in a way it moved me. And it's also artwork that is raw and real. And for me, that's important. I hope you gathered information about Doris Salcedo and her work, and that you take it and carry it with you from this class to the next class, to the rest of your school year, to the rest of your life. It was a complete pleasure to have the ability to research Salcedo's work, and there are many other pieces that are just as moving as these that I recommend you look at. As I promised, here's a list of the awards that Doris has received. There are many more grants that she also received that are also very interesting to look at.